Hi everybody, welcome to my channel, School of Scarlett. I'm so happy to have you here today. Today we're going to be talking about my new book that I'm so excited to introduce to you and the story behind the unfolding of how this book came to be. And stay tuned to the end to hear how the name was changed to EUPHORIA, how a whole nother piece to the book was added at the very last minute while I was doing the proofs, and how that was the divine intervention of God putting in this book what needed to be there. And it wasn't very comfortable for me, so stay tuned to the end to hear the whole story of that unfolding and how that went. Many of you who have met with me for one on ones, counseling, the course, or anything like that have worked with me in a way that we've come to talk about things more intimately. We've talked about careers, we've talked about the different processes of it. And in those areas, I share more personally my own lives with people as they're on their own journeys. So, this video is kind of sparking from the release of my new book and a recent one on one session that I had where I realized there's a little bit more of a need to really express a little bit more what this process is like, what that unfolding really looks like. Many people are curious. How does one leave a career? How does one start a new career? How do these unfoldings happen really? What were these people doing before? Talking about speakers or maybe people that they listen to. What was the life before? What is it now? How has it unfolded for them? And so I find that people really are curious about this and really want to know this because they are on their own journey. And while they may realize it's not the same, there are some things there that can be kind of pointers for one because we're actually one big ego. We're all working together. We're a collective. We are one. So, where one is struggling with something, another one is struggling with it as well or has already gone through it. So we really are beacons of knowledge for one another. So it is really a great thing to be able to work and communicate with one another in the capacity that I do. So, because of that, I want to share today what it happened to bring me to the place that I am now in my career. What has happened? What unfolded from the very beginning, from my first job to now? And so, all of that to say that I have quit my job. I am now in a different place now, and it's a place that I've always known I was going towards. So, my heart always knew this. So, if we can go back to my first job, I worked as a Sonic car hop. Although this was the first time they had Sonics, which are the like little hamburger fast food joints where that used to have the skating car hops that would deliver the food to you at your window. So there's still many of these in the United States, although they don't always have people skating, but they do deliver to your window. Well, I worked in one that was inside of a mall. That was the first time they were trying out having a fast food place like this, specifically Sonic, in the mall. So, anyhow, I was there and I was part of the opening of this new Sonic. And so I really did enjoy the fact that I was making my own money. And so every week or 2 weeks that I would get paid, that was something that I really felt proud about. I really felt good about, and it really was helpful and it was a good, useful tool to use that money for whatever things I needed at that age. So for me at that time, my job was useful. I didn't enjoy it a whole lot. I realized that work was work and it was hard. And I a lot of times did the drinks and my hands would get cold and I'd get like my fingernail beds and stuff would hurt and things like that from dealing with limes and all of these things. So it wasn't the easiest thing. I learned that work was work, but you get compensated for that. So I continued to do it. And so that was my first experience with working as a person. And so my next experience, I was actually lucky enough to get a good paying job in a hospital doing inspections. And so this job paid a lot more. It was an office job, it was a 9 to 5. It was a clean, stable job with benefits. And so now I was going and moving up into this more adult world, and it was a job that I could be proud of. So I went ahead and worked it. But little did I find out, or little did it take for me to find out how soul drenching and just soul killing it really was. I worked in a cubicle amongst many other professionals, and we all came in every morning. People would have their little chats around coffee and then go to their cubicles and work. And every so often they'd come out and talk and whatnot. And so there was these routines. It was very mundane, very quiet. Everything was gray. There was no windows. Um, it became very depressing for me because it wasn't something that I was prepared for in any kind of way. I really thought this was going to be something very beautiful, very luxurious. Working in an office was what I was thinking. But what it does to your soul is a whole nother thing. So I felt no freedom. I felt like I was trapped in a cage for the majority of the day. And so when I would get off work, I'd go and do what I need to do, get home. And by that time, it was getting late. Sun was going down. Things were changing. And I was a young person, so I was able to go out at night. So I did that and I was able to do things and, all of that. So, but it didn't take away from the fact that the job that I had did not align with me. I literally did not feel well going to work and I wanted to leave there as soon as I could. It was in every way possible not pleasant at all. The most pleasant things would be talking to my coworkers that were fairly nice people, but the job itself was extremely boring, extremely dull, mundane, and it really felt like a prison. It really did. And I became very, very, I felt internally depressed, like because of this job. It was solely because of this. So at some point, I had to leave it, and I did. I don't remember exactly how or what happened, but I did. And at that time, I was also going to school for psychology. So it was a natural transition, anyhow, for me to have left that job. So I transitioned to my first kind of psychology based job. This one may have come before or after, I'm not sure, because there was a time, I've taken a couple of jobs before I had graduated from my degree, but I worked in a women's shelter, a domestic violence, battered women's shelter. And so I worked there at the ripe old age of 18 or 19 years old. And basically, I was given the position of resident advocate, which is basically the person that oversees the shelter and manages the rules, manages the shelter, makes sure that all the women are in and out of the home, does intakes, basically like a house mother. But I was very young at that time, and I didn't really know a lot. I thought I knew about domestic violence. I had watched Lifetime movies and heard stories and things, but I was in for a rude awakening. I saw the worst of the worst. I saw women coming in beat up, children that had not slept, didn't have shoes, women that were tortured and abused in some of the worst ways. The attacks on some of these um, women was absolutely horrible. To see that men could do something like this or that this would happen was very shocking to me at that time. So, anyhow, it was something that I needed to go through. And so I experienced that. I went through that. I learned to give these women compassion. We had rules and things like that. And this is where I had trouble working for people. This was a nonprofit organization, and they had rules and regulations and things about what needed to be done, how women needed to be treated, the rules that they had to follow in order to stay there. Well, some of these women came in the worst shape and they couldn't even follow the basic rules because they physically couldn't. Either they were too battered, too tired, or just too mentally gone. And so I would help these women. We would get around these rules. We would make a way. I would break the rules for these women to be more compassionate with them, especially in the first week or two, and just to get them acclimated to where they were living, what the rules were. But the women that worked there before me, the management was not so understanding. They were on to me. They were on to the women. They would kick women out in the middle of the night. It was not a nice environment. So anyhow, I saw that there's well-meaning people out there, but there's more to it. There's more aspects to the way people behave. And even as a very young child, up until that point, I never really understood why people behaved the way they did. So oftentimes I would observe people trying to understand. And I think that's another reason I got into psychology, another reason why I enjoy watching movies and real life true stories. I really like to understand why humans do the things they do. And now I understand in a whole nother way. But at that time, I was trying to understand it logically. And it made no sense to me. It made no sense to me. All I knew is it hurt. It didn't feel good. And so at some point, I left that job and I went to go work for a larger domestic violence shelter in the area. And so this was a step up for me. And I was doing more of just the telephone work. I was managing the hotlines. I was doing the domestic violence and the sexual assault hotlines. And so I would answer these calls and help these women get to where they needed to be with safety and all of that, counsel them, and whatever needed to happen. And I learned a lot through that as well. Many different things relating to domestic violence and now sexual assault, the abuse of children, even the abuse of babies. All of these things I had to come in contact with, work with nurses, hospital people, our sane nurses, all of these people to hear the details of these things at that age was absolutely just, it flipped my world around. It wasn't something I had known as a child. So for me, this was just, I couldn't believe the level of pain some people go through and the level of abuse and torture and how humans can do this to one another. So I saw the very dark side of humanity, you could say. But I was helping. So I would see these women making the change, going forward, leaving that behind, starting new. So I got to see the visuals of people that actually really leave life behind, leave their home, leave their marriage, sometimes even leave their children and start fresh. So I think all of these things that I was witnessing and seeing kind of primed me for the things that I'm experiencing today. So anyhow, I continued to work there and all of those things continued to happen. So after that, I went on to go work somewhere differently. I started working with children. So I started working at a nonprofit children's center. And I got to work with children and families that had severe behavioral issues. Most of these kids were referred through by their schools, by CPS, by their doctors, by other therapists and things that had seen these extreme behavioral issues. And so I primarily ended up working more with the parents because the parents were the ones that were actually, I wouldn't say causing, but they were contributing to the environment and the behaviors that were manifesting. So I would work with the parents and I began to see the connections of how it's not always the child. It's hardly ever the child. It's never really, the problem is never really the problem. There is many layers to it. So that's where I began to learn about the many layers, the multifaceted aspects to being a human and how families and the structures of them and so many different things contribute to the way someone behaves, the beliefs someone has, the reactions they have, the kind of person that they become, whether or not they're brave, whether or not they're cowardly. All of these things develop from programming. So I realized this then, again, brings me to today. It helps me to today understand and piece together everything that has been my experience. So, following that, I continued to work in that field and I moved to another state and I also did that there. And it was very beautiful to work with children as well, to see that aspect of, sometimes you can forget what it's like to be a child. If you have the opportunity to be around children, it's a true blessing because they bring a whole nother lens to this world. They're seeing it from a whole nother lens. And so you get to experience that being around them because they ask questions, they talk about, they describe what they're seeing. They come from the heart. It's beautiful to watch. And I have the opportunity to be around children still. So I get to see this and even just going to like a football game and hearing kids talking amongst themselves and the way that they speak. Um, it's just so magical. They're so free. You can just sense it, you can feel it. So anyhow, I enjoyed working in that field. And so I continued to do that. And when I came back, I stayed out of state for a while, and then I came back. I still was working in this sort of field of the children's center. But when I returned back to where I lived after the children's center, I had to go work somewhere else. I took the first job that I could find when I got back to the state that I was originally living in. And this job was working for a refugee center. So it was working with people that were refugees. I specifically worked with unaccompanied minors, meaning children that come into this country, to the United States, unaccompanied, meaning that they come through Mexico, they're coming from Mexico, El Salvador, um, Honduras, these Guatemala, all of these kind of Central American countries. I was working mostly Central America and Mexico and these kind of countries that would come through uh, unaccompanied minors by themselves. Okay, so they were crossing the border by themselves, and so I would help them to get somewhere safe to be after they came through the border and they had been detained and all of these things. So we would help them find a safe place to live. Anyhow, and I also worked with the other refugees that were coming through the office, that would come in for English classes, that would come in to pick out clothes or furniture or whatever they happened to need. We were a group, we were a very small group that helped each other. There was a lot on my load, and it was a very, very stressful job. But I got to see that my problems with that job being stressful were minuscule, were tiny, tiny, tiny compared to the challenges and the things that these refugees had to face and were going through. They were coming from war zones, and even if there wasn't an actual war in their country, they were coming from for some kind of asylum. They had been abused, they had been targeted, they had been horrible things had happened to them, like their whole families had died, and now they were in the United States seeking safety, help, and maybe their whole businesses were stolen, and all kinds of things would happen in their countries, El Salvador, wherever they came from. There was Cubans coming, there was people from Syria coming, there was all kinds of people from Africa as well, and so these people it was crazy because they came from other countries and they had totally different ways of living. For example, one of the African families that came, um, once they got a vehicle and everything, one day they left their kids at a park and they went off and did errands, and the police got them, got the kids and was looking for them, and they were going to be in big trouble. Well, they didn't know why they were in trouble. They didn't understand because in their country it was very normal to leave your kids alone in the park or wherever and go off and do your things. And so, also for some of the kids and children I worked with, they were technically children. I worked with mostly teenagers, 14, 15, 16 years old. And yet, when they would come in this country, they would get into a lot of trouble because all of a sudden they would be drinking alcohol, smoking, doing kind of adult things, and get caught for it and get in trouble because that wasn't legal here. And they just didn't know any better because in their countries that was legal. And as a matter of fact, they were very used to living and consuming those beverages or whatever it happened to be. So it was a whole culture shock. But what really inspired me is to see people so lit up, so passionate about having a second chance in life, of having the possibility of the American dream, that they know they have nothing, that they've had a horrible past, most of them. And yet they are here and they are in this moment completely. And they were ready to learn, ready to work, ready to do whatever it takes to have this chance again. And they had that chance. Most of them went out there and worked. Most of them went out there and got their apartments. They did all of these things. And most of them today, I feel like they're probably living their American dream because, as far as the last time I saw most of these families, they had been set up in their apartments, they had jobs, and they had this attitude of growth, positivity, and excitement for life, which is what you need. And so their heart was in line with this new beginning they had. And so I began to see the courage that these people had. These people had no money, didn't understand the language here, didn't understand the culture, the rules, anything, didn't know what they were going to do for work. Yet they were happy, they were positive, they were ready and excited. And here I was in a new job, complaining about the stress of having too many cases. I had to kind of grow up. I had to kind of come to a realization that, hey, this isn't it. This isn't anything to complain about. This isn't a problem here. Look at these people. What can you do in your situation? So I prompt you in this moment to kind of look at your situation now. Because when I had my awakening, I realized in that moment that this is heaven. And I realized that everything around us is perfect. And we're just seeing it through a filter that is completely distorted, is dirty, is not the truth. And when I saw that, I realized I had everything I needed right here and now. The job I used to hate was the perfect job. The husband I used to complain about became the perfect husband. My daughter and anything that I used to complain about, she became the perfect daughter. My home became the perfect home. My pets became the perfect pets. All of a sudden, my whole life transformed in that moment because it wasn't the exterior. It wasn't that there was actually anything wrong with any of those things. There was something wrong with me, with my perceiving. And so, anyhow, in that moment, I wasn't realized. In that moment, I didn't have the clarity I do now. But you get sparks of insight throughout your life. And these are moments for you to grasp onto. These would be like glimpses. And so this was a glimpse. This was a glimpse into seeing how one has it really so good. Even in the worst, when you have just left your war ridden country with the clothes on your back and arrived in a new country where you don't speak the language, you don't know anything, all of a sudden you're still excited with life. Why is that? I got to see that, and that made me reflect, and that made me see things differently. So then I came home and I began to do things differently. I began to see that I didn't actually want that job. I did want to embrace my current moment, but I wanted to make it different because I didn't want to go into something that I didn't want. So I did have a moment of total clarity. I realized that I was getting home at 7 or 8 at night, bathing my daughter and putting her to sleep. I had no time with my daughter. And so at this time I had my daughter, I can actually think a little bit further back when I was working at the domestic violence shelter is when she was a baby. And I was holding her, looking in the mirror, and I was getting ready to go to work the next day. And she was only this big. I think she was 3 months old. She was born very small. But I was holding her. I thought, how in the world am I going to leave her? She cannot talk. She can't take care of herself. What? This does not feel right in my heart. So I called my supervisor and I let her know I can't go back to work. If you have any options for night work, I'll go ahead and do that. That's when I switched to working nights. And it was a lot of work, but you have to realize a lot of things that come up in life, you're going to get these little nudges. Like when I was holding my daughter and it just did not feel right in any sense of the way to leave her. Go with your nudges, go with your instinct. For thousands and millions of years, a mother has always taken care of her child. It is not natural to leave your child. If you have to, if that is the only case, if that is the only way, okay. But you need to, what I'm trying to point into is the nudges, the messages that our body is giving us, so that intuition we have to pay attention to. And so, like I say, later on in my career, things, kind of changed a little bit. Things began to be different. My job sometimes would take me away from my daughter, sometimes would bring me closer to her. This particular job with the refugees took me away from my daughter. And so I realized that after I had that kind of like little awakening. And so I left that job and it was really hard to leave because they wouldn't let me leave. But anyhow, eventually I left that job, but I got a lot out of it. And I hope that I was able to help many people as well. But I myself took a lot from that. Um, anyhow, after that, I got back into working with children at the previous place I had worked before and doing the same sort of work that I had done. And it was my passion. So I got to be with that and work with that for a while. Here and there, I would switch. Sometimes I would go into teaching. I got an opportunity to work at a Head Start. I got an opportunity to work at a public school, and I got to teach. I've worked with my specialty became working with autistic children, children that had disabilities of some kind. So that was my heart. So I got to go through all of that. While still there was this bit of me that wanted to transition into something different. I took a little time off and I decided that maybe I was done. I was done working and I was going to now focus on other things. Well, in that time, a little nudge came through that it was time to return. Maybe this time try something a little more out there within my own field that I hadn't done before. So I started working and counseling people that had serious mental illness. And I learned a lot there. I didn't work there very long, but I worked there enough to really work with all these different serious mental illnesses, see all aspects of that, see this hospital side of it, see homeless people, see many sides of this, see psychosis, schizophrenia, many things that I had never really experienced throughout my career, even when I was working with families and all of that stuff. So that really opened up that level of what is consciousness? What is going on? And at this point, I actually was awakened, but it really still was something that I was paying attention to when I would talk to a schizophrenic, when I would talk to someone in psychosis. I was really, playing with that consciousness and seeing what was there. It was quite amazing. But what I learned at all the places that I worked is that as long as you're working for someone, or at least in my case, you're not really free to use the therapies, the modalities, the language, or anything that you want to use in order to help someone. And I'm talking about in counseling, but it could be something different for you. And so, for example, in this place, they only used cognitive behavioral therapy. Well, that's only one kind of therapy. And at times when I would integrate different things that, I thought would be helpful, I would begin to see huge openings. And the doctors themselves, the psychiatrists would talk to me about it. They were amazed by the advancements and changes that some of these clients and patients were making. So I've done a lot of things outside the book in my career, but I realized at some point, you know what? Why do I have to constantly go outside the book and fight with all of these different, people and, management and this and that, and have to be the management and try to move up and do all of these things in order to make these things happen, when I can just go ahead and in my own space, in this moment, create something for myself because I have that power. Once you become realize, you know that you have that power to do so. So in that moment, I went ahead and decided to do that. And so I took that chance and I quit that job. And I went on my own. Yes, I had some counseling patients that I already had, and I opened up for one on ones and things like that. And the people began to come. Um, I've always had the desire to have my own school because I've always enjoyed working in schools. I've always enjoyed everything about schools. I enjoy the field trips, the children, the reading, the books, so many different things about it, the routines. So all of a sudden, I had this nudge in my heart that I would have a school one day. And while I couldn't have a school right now, I started this channel, and so this is how things manifest. This is how things unfold to where all of a sudden you're leading your perfect life. Now keep in mind, the majority of all of that career and story that I told, I was not awakened. I was not conscious. I was living probably with a very negative mindset, but that is what manifested. And if I look back at it now, really, it wasn't that bad. Yes, I was struggling, it wasn't the perfect thing. I was oftentimes unhappy with it, but it was very necessary for what I have now, what the skills that I've acquired that I currently use. So it was all needed. So everything is in its perfect time. Everything is perfect. So, anyhow, now with this new knowledge that I could do this myself, having my own school was a total reality, could totally happen. So all of a sudden I start with this. You have to kind of start where you're at. Okay. A lot of times we think, oh, everything's going to change in an instant and I'm going to have $1 billion in the bank and this is going to happen because I'm manifesting. It may or it may not. Most of the times it's not. You're going to be abundant. Things are going to be coming to you, but you need to pay attention to that. You're going to notice it's not just in money or monetary ways. Could be in ideas. For example, starting a course. That was an insight, an idea to start a course, something that I really enjoy doing. I enjoy putting together things. I enjoy teaching and having groups and moving through that. And I see the value and power of the heart. While I've had a non dual awakening, working with the heart is essentially working with your true, authentic self. So turning it into that and helping people, partnering with them, felt like the perfect next step. And so I took that, and I didn't know if people would enroll in that course. I didn't know what would happen. I didn't have a huge following. I didn't, I was just a person here in Texas, a mom here, just, any old person who was to say that anybody would sign up. And so I had in my mind what would be a good number for amount of students per course. Why? Because as a teacher, I kind of know that you need a little bit of a balance with how many students are in a course or class. I knew my perfect number. And so when I was a teacher, the perfect number was like 17 or 18. If I had that many students, it was really just a smooth oiled machine, worked very well. But when I had 22 children, 24, it became a little bit harder. When I had too few children, for some reason, it didn't flow as well. So there is that magic number. Well, guess what? For my first course, all of a sudden, that magic number, I had that number of students. So it was there. Did I know that would happen? No. But all I had to do was trust and just do it, put it out there, see what would happen. The second time I put the course out, I also had in mind a certain number of students I would like for that course. All of a sudden, that number arrived. So all of these things began to become reality. So I began to see it happen. Many other manifestations and things have happened before, but we're focusing about career here. And so I began to trust that with my book. I didn't write my book to become some bestseller author. I wrote it as a passion project. It came from my heart. It came from that passion and flame I had with my twin flame. And I'm really glad I wrote it because as time passes, your memory completely diminishes in a lot of ways, especially from awakening. So to remember that, to have that written down, I think is so special. But I didn't write it for those reasons to get anything out of it. You don't make any money off of these things. Books, you don't make a lot of money off of them. But I put it out there and people began to read it and email me how they related to it, how similar things have happened with them, how it touched them, how this and that. And I began to see that I'm not the only one. Do you know there was a time that I went through that twin flame journey and I was suffering and he had passed away? And I really thought that no one in this world had ever experienced anything like this. I thought I was the only one. And many times in my life, I thought I was the only one, only to find out there is plenty of people here in this world that have experienced the same sort of things. And so now, with the beauty and the advancement of the internet and YouTube and all of these online communities, we're able to connect and find each other and connect in ways that we haven't before. Before it was far in between that you'd come across anyone that had anything like this happen to them. So, anyhow, that's all to say that we are really in this great time right now to really make these connections with one another. And it really helps. It really helps out a lot. So I created that for also that reason, because I noticed that the friends I had after awakening, a lot of them fell away or they completely were showing like their true colors. And I had to decide whether or not I wanted to engage with some of these friends. I had one friend that it became very clear that every time I spoke with her, she was in that victim consciousness. And as much as I tried to awaken her from that, there was no doing it because she loved it so much. And so these things happen. And so as those friends began to fall away, I really began to think, how will I find anyone to interact with living in this small town in Texas that pretty much everybody believes the same thing? And then these courses began and the connections started coming and people started emailing me about the books and we began connecting. And I began seeing myself in so many of the people I spoke with. And I began realizing that we are all one. And whatever that one is coming to me with, or talking to me about, we're in oneness with that. We're in connection with that. And that's why we are so in tune. And so if you're watching this channel, you probably have similar experiences to what I have. And so this is just to say any old person anywhere can have an awakening. Any old person anywhere is awakened right now in this moment. Nothing has changed. You've always been here awakened. You're just pretending you're not. But I sometimes wondered, my husband complains a lot. My husband's one of these people that is like a grumpy guy. He'll come home and he'll complain about the house. He'll come home and he'll complain about the car. He'll come home and he'll complain about the animals or this and that. It's not good enough. It needs to be better. We need to do this or that and the other. Look at this moment. Look right here, right where you are in this moment. Where do you live? What do you do? Really look at it. Take a moment and slow down. I cracked up laughing the other day because there is an article out there, and it's been out there for a long time. It's not just one, I think it's been many, that says that the town I live in Texas is the most undesirable town in all of the United States. So I just started laughing. Like it just was a spontaneous laugh that would not stop. And this just happened yesterday because I could not believe it. Because where I live is heaven. And so I cannot believe, and I'm about to start laughing again because I cannot believe that, people have these lenses where they see things in a way that is completely distorted. I live in heaven. Yes, I live in that town. But when you come to my space, there's nothing you could pay me for me to give up what I have. Where I live, I've lived there. It's lived. The tree that's out front was, yay high when I moved in. It's tall now, and it's the same tree that my daughter has a swing on and swings off. Next to that is a big patch of land where we grow our garden every year, where we eat summer vegetables every year from that same soil that we plant and eat from every year that we tend to. It's the same land further on that we ride our four-wheelers on, that we play with our dog, that my husband cuts the lawn, that we have our friends do and bring their fancy car shows and sometimes have parties here. Our backyard is a place where we gather and have parties with our friends. We have fires outside most evenings where we sit and talk. Our animals are there. They've been there this whole time. They stomp on the ground. There's no more grass in some areas, and it's just sand, and it's been pounded down so much from their hooves, from my horses and cows. It's kind of gone down. Okay. All of this is so special. We go past that area where my husband's garage is. There's all kinds of evidence that my husband has been there. There's grease everywhere. You'll find nuts and bolts lost in the ground here and there and in the garage. And he keeps his garages real clean, but outside of them. And you'll find evidence of him that he's been working on cars. Everything is there. Okay. You go a little bit over to the side and you'll see the walkway that we created. You'll see the stone walkway that we literally put in ourselves. Each one of us put the stones one by one. The garden that we created ourselves. We didn't hire anybody. The whole thing we did ourselves. You go inside the house, the floors have all been put in by my husband. He basically built that house. That house was one way and it's been completely transformed now. He's built the bar from a big piece of cedar from a tree we had. Okay? The cowhides in the home, we purchased those at a family member's store when we were on vacation. Everything has a story. The bathroom, my husband and I remodeled ourselves while my daughter was away when Christmas. Okay. Every room in that house has been remodeled. My daughter's room has been remodeled by my husband, us as a family. And so everything in there has been touched with love. Everything in there has been lived. There has been a home-cooked meal in that home every night. So this is what you cannot buy. This is what you build. This is what ends up happening when you follow your heart. And then you turn around and you see, whoa, you think your life isn't that great, but look at all of this. Look at all of you, everything you've manifested and created. How can you complain? How can anybody buy that? You can't purchase that. That's something that only God gives you. That's something that comes from the heart. And I get a little teary-eyed because this is what's missing. Everybody's missing this moment. Stop for a moment. Look at your life. Look at it. Look at everything you've manifested, even in the unconscious state you may have been. Isn't it beautiful? There's beauty in everything, and actually that's part of awakening. You awaken to beauty because everything has its own inherent beauty that we're actually missing. And it's really sad. So I really hope that one day you awaken to beauty. And the way you awaken to beauty is you come into this moment. You slow down. You actually look at people. You actually slow down and savor your food, and you thank the food for it. Thank yourself for it. Thank God for it, however you want to do it. Be present. This is heaven right here and now. The world may say this is the worst city or town in all of the United States, but that sounds like a joke to me because I'm in heaven. I walk outside and I literally feel like I'm in the Garden of Eden. So you can perceive the world the way the world says it is, that it's horrible, that this town is bad, that this group is bad, that that person did this, that no one should do that, that this and that. or you can go within and you can create it yourself the way you want it. What's your world look like? What do you want it to be like? I've just kind of ended up here. Like I say, I've kind of unconsciously lived my life, and here I am. But now that I am conscious, here comes the other piece. A lot of people wonder, well, what happens after you quit your job after an awakening? And I know this video is getting long, but it has a little bit more to it. So this is where people really get curious when I'm talking to them and stuff on one-on-ones and counseling and stuff like that. They want to know what happened after that. Well, yeah, I quit my job. So I started doing that and I did the course and the things did start showing up. Now, did it take off completely? No. It's still in a process, but the process is what's beautiful. The process is what you end up really loving and what really integrates and embodies all these aspects that are developing and unfolding within you that have always been there. They just haven't been unfolded. So we have to kind of allow for that process, allow it to happen, even if it's slow, even if your bank account's a little low for a little while. You have to trust that everything's manifesting. Just look, everything's manifesting. And so as you go along that path, all of a sudden different things will happen. Sometimes people say they don't know what will happen, what career they want, or what they want to happen. It's all kind of tied in this nice package. A lot of times it's with the own gifts that you've been given, like the stuff that you already have. So for me, for example, this whole thing with the School of Scarlett unfolded. And because that is something that I've always kind of wanted. School. It's just something not wanted, it's just something I enjoy. I enjoy school. So that unfolded in that way. And where is it at now? Right now, it's a YouTube channel and I have courses online. And so I'm very grateful for that. I love this. This is amazing. But, I'm kind of old school. I'm used to schools, actual schools. And so what I think and I envision and I want to manifest is an actual school, a school where people can come as they wish to me, or to the school or whatever. And so to me, a physical building is something that I see this developing into. So we may not be right where we are wanting to be. We might have this awakening, quit our job, and all of a sudden we don't have a job, or all of a sudden we're just working in a bookstore. But that's not the whole story. Okay? Everything, every day something's changing. So where is your start point? What's the next actual logical step for you that's actually coming up? Well, for me it was courses. For me it was YouTube. So other thing that happened for me was something very simple. I've always enjoyed teaching in schools, like I talk about. All of a sudden, it was suggested, I saw it on Facebook, to substitute teach. All of a sudden, now I'm substitute teaching. And I get to teach in a different capacity. I get to make my schedule to where I can actually still do my courses and things and counseling or whatever I want to do. Yet I'm still in the classroom around children, experiencing that frequency with them and that kind of energy that they bring and teaching them as well what I can teach them. So I get to do that in a capacity where it's not draining for me. There was a time I was a teacher and it was very draining to me. I didn't have much time to myself. I felt like every minute of the day, even when I wasn't working, I was a teacher. So for me, that just didn't work. But substitute teaching allows me to be a teacher while still doing the many other things that I would like to do. So that blessing has come, and it's just substitute teaching. It's not this grandest, biggest thing. Some people think that we're going to come across this thing that's going to be the most magical, hugest thing. It could be as simple as you becoming the coach of a little league team, and all of a sudden that is your passion. Follow the next step. You don't know what is in that package. So the next thing for me was my husband loves car shows. These are shows where people meet up, have cars and stuff. A lot of times they do craft shows along with them for the ladies, for the women that are there with their husbands. And so they sell different items and stuff. And so my husband suggested that I open up a little shop there. And so I wasn't really sure at first. I actually didn't think it would work out. I kind of came in with a bad attitude, to be honest with you. And when I set it up and everything, I wasn't expecting that much, but I really enjoyed people watching, and I also enjoyed interacting with the people that would come through and want to talk. Some of them would come to actually buy. Some of them would actually come just to talk. So I really enjoyed that a lot more than sitting next to the car. So now that's something that I'm doing. And so my daughter got to do that with me, and she really liked it. And now she's taken over that, created the little shop, has its own Instagram now, and she goes with me now. We're going to go tomorrow to one of these shops and put up our little shop. And we're making it all girly and pink. And so it's bonding us. We're making money and it's family time. And so, do you see how, like, the heart just unfolds things that just somehow have their own intelligence? They bring everything and tie everything up in this nice bow for you, but you didn't even know how it happened. But all of a sudden, like, all aspects of it work. So that's how things happen. And that's just what's happening right now. Those aren't big, grand, crazy things. Those are just normal things. And so a lot of people think that these miracles and crazy things need to happen in one's life for it to mean something or be real. No, 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 no. This moment is it's this moment is the miracle. This moment is everything. What you have right here and now is beautiful. Just stop and look. And so sometimes I think, oh, would I ever want to leave and move somewhere else? I've always loved Hawaii. I went there on my honeymoon and I felt like that's where my soul was meant to live. And so I've always thought about that, but my soul is just so in love and so in heaven in this moment. And so wherever this moment takes me, that's where it'll be the best. So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. Wherever you're at, that is the perfect place, the perfect moment. I hope you enjoy this video. I hope that you got something from it. Share it, get it out there, share some positivity. Um, I have my course starting on the 1st of January. So it's like a New Year's portal coming through to realign you to the heart. So if you're interested in signing up, right now I have my early bird special and it's only going on for a little bit longer here. So go ahead and sign up. I also have my new book, EUPHORIA, coming out. And this book is a passion from my heart. There's a little bit more to this story, so I'll go ahead and share it now. This is an example of what the heart can do to you. The heart can make you feel uncomfortable. I talk about following the heart, and the heart usually feels good. But as you go following your heart, a lot of times you'll come across something that, it's resisting it somehow. And what's really happening is the brain's coming in and it's trying to tell the heart, hey, like, you really don't want to do that. If you do that, something's going to happen. So, anyhow, I wrote this book, and this book was called basically something completely else. It was called basically Everything About Love or something around that title. I don't remember it right this second. But the book is about everything about love. I looked at human relationships, I looked at my own personal life and experiences and added those. I looked at animal life, I looked at ecosystems, I looked at the plant life, everything, and incorporated it into this book. And basically, it ties everything that is and connects it. Okay, so it ties everything in through love. And so it's a lot of information there and it's beautiful. Okay, I go back and I read this book and I can tell you that's my divine self writing that, because I read that and I'm like, whoa, what is this? So this book was that. And then when I was getting ready to get the proof, all of a sudden I get this nudge from my heart that that book is not complete. And it wasn't like an auditory thing, but it was a complete and clear knowing. You need to add the piece that you left out of your first book. So I have a book that I've written about my twin flame journey. It's a shorter book. It's a book kind of down to the point about my twin flame journey. And I left out a portion of my awakening because I felt that it was too much. I felt that it didn't describe, I couldn't convey it. I didn't know how to put it into words in a way that others would understand what that was, what that feeling was through that awakening. So I described my awakening, but not in the way that I actually experienced, not in that detailed way. I just said that it happened this way, but I didn't describe the bodily feelings sensations that I felt. So it wasn't just the bodily sensations, it is literally like an explosion that happens. And so for me, that was something more in the lines of euphoria. And it was something as an awakening as much as like a sensual rush. Now, I'm not talking something sexual here. This was like a sensual, like a weird kind of thing here. And so I describe this in this book, and I believe that I have never heard anybody describe an awakening in this way. But it was how it was felt for me, and it was out of this world. And it has blown my mind in so many ways because it ties into other parts of my twin flame story that pretty much, again, tie it in this nice bow. So, a lot of times you think that your life is falling apart, that you don't live in the nicest house, or you don't have this, or they have a better job, or you should be doing this or that. No, no, no. Everything's perfect right where you are. Just sit into that moment, love what you got now, and keep taking the next step. That's all you got to do. That's all you got to do here. So that's all I've been doing. And so basically, this book. So, Euphoria is the book that I'm introducing. And it wasn't originally called Euphoria. It was actually the book about love. And it had everything about love in there, which it still does. It has basically all the experiences that I felt were relevant to speak about love in my own life and other experiences and things that I've seen among families, among animals, the ecosystem, plants. I tied basically the whole thing into this beautiful container of love, into this oneness that we truly are. So the book is all about love, and it just basically goes through love in all of these different ways. What is love? And it goes through everything that can be love. So it's a beautiful, beautiful book. And I will tell you, this book is something that is divinely written. When I go back and read this, it opens my eyes. I don't even recognize having written some of the stuff. Like, it's so profound to me. But anyhow, when I got the proof for this book that came through, um, all of a sudden I had this nudge from my heart. And my heart said, this book is not going to be called this. This book is going to be called Euphoria. I said, what? No, this can't be. This book's already complete. And I kind of fought with that. I said, no. All of a sudden, I had this insight. There's something missing. I said, what is missing? That's what came through. There's something missing in that book, and it needs to go in there. I said, what is it? So I went and took a walk, did some exercising, and all of a sudden I got this insight come through that there is a piece that's missing from your original book. So the book that I originally wrote about my twin flame journey is a shorter book that goes through my twin flame journey to my awakening. And I left out a portion, which is just basically a description of what it feels like within the body to actually go through an awakening. And I've never heard it described by anybody else. So I think this is why there was such a push within my heart to get this out there. So there's a portion to awakening that is very specific, very strange that it occurred with me, I think, because it really tied into my twin flame story in a very profound way. But what I'm talking about here is I was basically led to add a portion of the book that explains the actual sensations and the moving through of the awakening throughout the body. And so this is a very kind of sensual experience, but it's not like a sexual experience, but it's an experience that is felt very, very much in the senses. So it's something that I basically describe word for word how it felt that it happened. At the time that I wrote my first book, it didn't come to me how I could even convey this in words. There's a lot of things that it doesn't seem that the vocabulary, the language that we have, even can support it saying any of this. Most of this is beyond and before language, and it can only be understood by an inner knowing. So later on, the words did come to me, and this is where I've developed and been able to add that piece in. But you have to know that I went through quite a struggle, and this is just to kind of show you that these things do happen even while you follow your heart. I didn't feel that that would be the greatest thing to do, to change the name, to add in this portion, and to add in this subname that was quite embarrassing for me. I fought with my heart. I said, no, I don't feel comfortable doing this. What would people say? What would people do? What would my family say? What would my daughter say? My husband, all of these things. What would people say or think? And what is this? And so I got into this loop got sucked back down into fear and all of these weird things of people pleasing, of being so concerned with all of these things rather than following my heart that is telling me that this is what needs to be in there. And not only that this needs to be in there, this has to be in there. So I had to do it. And that's what the heart does. It's like following God's words for you. Some people say they're led by God. Whether you're led by God or led by the heart, it's all the same. There is an inner knowing, an inner intelligence within you that is directing your path. Do you see that? And so at times it's a little uncomfortable. At times you have to fight with it. It's actually the brain that's jumping in and saying, hey, heart, don't do that. You're going to be embarrassed. You're going to be shamed. It's not going to work out. Don't do that. Don't do that. But the heart's saying, you have to do this. You have to do this. And that's where you have to follow with the heart. But most people actually, believe it or not, go with the brain, with the thoughts, with the thought streams, and they listen to that, and they don't ever put out their book. They don't ever do whatever. My first book and all of that is, I wouldn't say is the greatest book. It was a passion project. I wrote it from my heart. I wrote it because I wanted to do it. I wrote it because that's what felt good to me. It doesn't make me hardly any money. This book won't really make me hardly any money either. But I do feel that it will be a very potent book, a very profound book, and I think it will be very big. And I think all the people that need to read it will get their hands on it. So it will be available. So it will be released on December 10th on Amazon, but I am doing pre-order signed copies. And these are pre-ordered signed copies that I will sign and write in there whatever message that you would like. And so I'm doing those just for right now, kind of as a promotion, kind of as something exciting to do prior to my actual book being released. So this will only be offered at this time and not at any other time. And I do feel that this book is going to be huge. I think it's going to be something really amazing that's going to open people's hearts. So, so if you're interested in this book, I do have the link in the comments of how to order the pre-order signed copies. The Amazon copies will be available online on December 10th. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that you will share it. I hope that you will integrate it. Um, and I hope that you will come back. Thank you so much for watching. I love you all.